Shabbat Shalom to everybody.
Shalom.
Praise Yahweh once again that we can be together, enter into his presence with joy and gladness, with a worshipping heart. And as we are now in our journey in the book of Devarim, we are looking at chapter 3, verse 23 to 7:11 today. And Jackie's going to start off with 3 and go to the end of 4, and then we'll discuss that and carry on. Okie dokie, where are we here? Okay.
And I pleaded with Yahweh at that time, saying, O Master Yahweh, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For who is a mighty one in the heavens or on earth, who does according to your works and according to your might? I pray, let me pass over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, this good hill country, and Lebanon. But Yahweh was enraged with me for your sake, and would not listen to me. And Yahweh said to me, Enough of that. Speak no more to me about this matter. Go up to the top of Pisgah and lift up your eyes westward and northward and southward and eastward, and look with your eyes, for you do not pass over this Jordan. But command YAHWEH and strengthen him and make him brave, for he shall pass over before this people and cause them to inherit the land which you see. And we dwelt in the valley opposite Beit Peor. And now, O Israel, listen to the laws and the right rulings which I am teaching you to do, so that you live. And you shall go in and possess the land which Yahweh Elohim of your fathers is giving you. Do not add to the word which I command you, and do not take away from it, so as to guard the commands of Yahweh your Elohim which I am commanding you. Your eyes have seen what Yahweh did at Baal Peor, for Yahweh your Elohim has destroyed from your midst all the men who followed Baal Peor. But you who are clinging to Yahweh your Elohim are alive today, every one of you. See, I have taught you laws and right rulings, as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me to do thus in the land which you go to possess. And you shall guard and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding before the eyes of the peoples who hear all these laws, and they shall say, Only a wise and understanding people is this great nation. For what great nation is there which has Elohim so near to it, as Yahweh our Elohim is to us, whenever we call on him? And what great nation is there that has such laws and righteous right rulings, like all this Torah, which I set before you this day? Only guard yourself, and guard your life diligently, lest you forget the words your eyes have seen, and lest they turn aside from your heart all the days of your life. And you shall make them known to your children and your grandchildren. The day when you stood before Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb, Yahweh said to me, Assemble the people to me, and I make them hear my words, so that they learn to fear me all the days they live on the earth, and teach them to their children. And you came near and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire to the heart of the heavens, darkness, cloud, and thick darkness. And Yahweh spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the voice of words, but saw no form. You only heard a voice. And he made known to you this covenant which he commanded you to do, the 10 words, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. And Yahweh commanded me at that time to teach you laws and right rulings, for you to do them in the land which you pass over to possess. Therefore, diligently guard yourselves, for you saw no form when Yahweh spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you should do corruptly, and shall make for yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any beast that is on the earth, or the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the heavens, the likeness of any creature that creeps on the ground, or the likeness of any fish that is in the water under the earth. And lest you lift up your eyes to the heavens, and shall see the sun and the moon and the stars, and all the host of the heavens, and you be drawn away into bowing down to them and serving them, which Yahweh your Elohim has allotted to all the peoples under all the heavens. But Yahweh has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Mitzrayim, to be his people, an inheritance as it is today. And Yahweh was enraged with me because of your words, and swore that I would not pass over the Jordan, and that I would not enter the good land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance. For I am to die in this land. I am not passing over the Jordan, but you are passing over, and shall possess that good land. Guard yourselves. lest you forget the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, which he made with you, and shall make for yourselves a carved image in any form, as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you. For Yahweh your Elohim is a consuming fire, a jealous El. When you bring forth children and grandchildren, and shall grow old in the land, and shall do corruptly, and make a carved image in the form of whatever, and shall do what is evil in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim to provoke him, I shall call the heavens and earth to witness against you on that day, that you soon completely perish from the land which you pass over the Jordan to possess. You do not prolong your days in it, but are completely destroyed. And Yahweh shall scatter you among the peoples, and you shall be left few in number among the nations where Yahweh drives you. And there you shall serve mighty ones, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But from there you shall seek Yahweh your Elohim, and shall find when you search for him with all your heart and with all your being. In your distress, when all these words shall come upon you in the latter days, then you shall return to Yahweh your Elohim, and shall obey his voice. For Yahweh your Elohim is a compassionate El. He does not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers which he swore to them. For ask now of the days that are past, which were before you, since the day that Elohim created man on the earth, and ask from one end of the heavens to the other end of the heavens, whether there has been a word as great as this, or has been heard like it. Has the people heard the voice of Elohim speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard and live? Or has Elohim tried to go and take for himself a nation from the midst of the nations by trials, and by signs, and by wonders, and by battle, and by a strong hand and an outstretched arm, and by great fearsome deeds, according to all that Yahweh your Elohim did for you in Mitzrayim before your eyes? You have been shown it, to know that Yahweh himself is Elohim, there is no one beside him. From the heavens he let you hear his voice to instruct you, and on the earth he showed you his great fire, and you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. And because he loved your fathers, therefore he chose their seed after them, and brought them out of Mitzrayim with his presence, with his great power, to drive out before you nations greater and stronger than you, to bring you in, to give you their land as an inheritance as it is today. And you shall know today, and shall recall to your heart, that Yahweh himself is Elohim in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath, there is none else. And you shall guard his laws and his commands, which I command you today, so that it is well with you and with your children after you, and so that you prolong your days on the soil which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you for all time. Then Moshe separated 3 cities beyond the Jordan towards the rising of the sun, for a manslayer to flee there, he who unknowingly murdered his neighbor without having hated him in time past, and might flee to one of these cities and live. Betzer in the wilderness in the level land for the Reubenites, and Ramoth in Gilead for the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan for the Manasshites. And this is the Torah which Moshe set before the children of Israel. These are the witnesses and the laws and the right rulings which Moshe spoke to the children of Israel before they came out of Mitzrayim beyond the Jordan, in the valley opposite Beit Peor, in the land of Sihon, sovereign of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon, whom Moshe and the children of Israel had stricken after they came out of Mitzrayim. And they took possession of this land and the land of Og, sovereign of Bashan, 2 sovereigns of the Amorites, who were beyond the Jordan towards the rising of the sun, from Aroer, which is on the bank of the Wadi Arnon, even to Mount Sion, which is Hermon, and all the desert plain beyond the Jordan, as far as the sea of the Arava, below the slopes of Pisgah.
Okay, so the second Torah portion from the book of Devarim, we see here this is called Va'et Hanan, which means and I sought favor. And the root word that's used here for favor is Hanan, which means to show favor, be gracious to, or dealt graciously with, or to give voluntarily or show favor. And it's highlighting here kind of how urgent Moshe was pleading with Yahweh, basically begging Yahweh that he could actually go into the promised land. He was pleading with Yahweh, humbling himself before Yahweh, letting go of all pride, and he was really seeking earnestly the favor of Elohim to actually get to go and see what he had led these people all these years to receive. And so Moshe declares the mighty power, the presence, and the very great works of Yahweh. He reminds them of all the things that Yahweh had done to get them to this place of entrance. And as a trustworthy witness of the Most High, he's reaching out to Yahweh and he's saying, what I've personally witnessed, this desire that he had, knowing the power, the might, and the strength of Yahweh, he wants to actually go into the promised land too, you know. Tehillah 106 verse 2-3 says, who does relate the mighty acts of Yahweh or declare all his praise? Blessed are those who do righteousness, who guard right ruling, who do righteousness at all times. So this is a wonderful song that's kind of highlighting some valuable lessons because it's giving the answer to the questions, because those who are guarding right ruling and are doing righteousness at all times are the ones who are witnesses of the great works and mighty acts of Yahweh. They're the ones that can declare his praise. They're the ones that can truly witness of him. And so Moshe, seeking the favor of Yahweh, Yahweh began to show Moshe his might. And in a sense, Moshe is earnestly making this plea to see the fullness of the deliverance of Yahweh made complete. He wanted to see everything that had been promised. He wants to see the fulfillment of this, you know, bringing Israel into the promised land, but it wasn't to be. In verse 26, we see that Moshe writes in this plea to enter the land. You know, Yahweh quickly silenced him and said, enough of that. Basically, Yahweh said, stop pleading with me, you know. And it says, but Yahweh was enraged with me. You can recognize this sobering reminder that we serve a mighty, awesome Elohim. It's not just a buddy or somebody that we treat as an acquaintance. He's a mighty Elohim who's given us life. And he's given us abundant life that we are to guard and treasure with our all. And so we have to carefully listen to, obey, and recognize the voice of our mighty Savior. And when he says no, it is no. The Hebrew word that's translated as enraged, some translations have it as wrath or angry, comes from the root word avar, which means to pass over, pass by, or pass on, a word that we are familiar with because we do get the root ivri from this verb, to pass over, Hebrews. But here we see it can be a word that's used to express being angry or wrath, such as overlooking a request and not listening to a matter. And the form that it's written in, it's simply saying that Yahweh passed over Moshe and his request, so he wasn't going to entertain it. You know, when we understand the shadow picture and what it represents for us, we clearly understand that with Moshe not entering into the promised land, Yehoshua leading the nation into the promise, we are given a wonderful work, a picture, a shadow picture of the work of Yeshua Messiah, being the Word made flesh that would die and rise again, and the one who causes us to enter in. And as we look at this is such a powerful Torah portion for us in many ways. What we've just read in the end of chapter 3 and chapter 4, it really highlights again the urgency for us that Moshe was giving this new generation, that just because Moshe is not now going in doesn't mean you don't listen to the words that Moshe has instructed them in. You know, we have over many centuries corrupted theologies of man, teachings of man that are taught as teachings that have thrown Moshe's words aside. The commands of Elohim as given through Moshe, the Torah of Moshe, thrown it aside and said, no, it's dead to us now. In the death of Messiah, that's now dead to us. We don't need it. And this is sadly immature, corrupted theologies that are leading masses astray. You know, when we see this idea of Moshe making it very clear, these are the commands that you must do to possess. In other words, don't forget what I've taught you. I've led you to this point. This is where Shaul highlights that Moshe is a trainer unto Messiah, but you don't now throw off everything you've been trained in. You now exercise what you've been trained in. And I see here a powerful picture that many want to almost take Moshe in with them as another negative side. It's almost like following the letter of the law. But now many who recognize that we need to obey the Torah, we're walking according to the Spirit. according to the newness of life that our Master has given us in that which we've been trained in and instructed in for righteousness. But trying to say Moshe is no longer applicable is immature corruption. I don't know how else to say it. Moshe was told, you're not going in. You've done your job. You brought them here. We know why Moshe wouldn't go in. Yahweh told him, because you rebelled at the mouth of Yahweh when you struck the rock when you should have spoken to it, you and Aharon are not going to enter in. And you know, Yahweh doesn't kind of wing it as he goes along. He understands perfectly his people, his covenant that he's called, and he gives people choices to obey, to disobey. Consequences of those choices will be made clear. Moshe rebelled. He had a consequence of not entering in. But in a shadow picture type, we see powerful markers that are able to teach us the valuable lessons that we have in Messiah, the teachings that we receive from Shaul, in highlighting for us a clear fact that just because Moshe didn't enter in physically doesn't mean the words of Moshe did not enter in. Because the words of Moshe were the words of Yahweh. And we don't add or take away, which we see in this Torah portion again. We uphold, as Shaul says, we uphold the Torah. You know, in verse 27, Moshe is told to go up to the top of Pisgah and let his eyes look west, north, south, and east. Now, what Moshe had done, what he had worked for, was not in emptiness. It wasn't in vain. You know, he wouldn't cross the Yarden, yet, in a manner of speaking, his words would cross over. You know, and the promise that Israel, under Moshe's leadership of the words that were instructed through Moshe, now under Yehoshua's leadership, would still go on, because Yehoshua wouldn't take on a new style of leadership. He would be operating in the very words that were given by Yahweh through Moshe to the nation. He would, however, as a last moment of his life